Hi, and welcome to my channel. Or if you're a returning subscriber, hi again. My name's Teslark, and today I'm going to show you how you can make a water ripple effect using UV resin, epoxy resin, and alcohol ink. As always, all of the materials that I use for this project will be linked down below. So if you're curious about any of that, all of that information will be down there for you. And let's just hop into today's video. To save us some time in this video, I went ahead and I pre-mixed my resin, but the tray that I'm using holds 150 milliliters of resin, and our first step is going to be to fill up that tray. So I'm using a combination of alcohol inks here. I'm using Teal by Pinata Colors alcohol inks, and also blue from Let's Resin. It's always a good idea to give your alcohol inks a good shake before you use them because some of that pigment can settle at the bottom. So I put just a few drops into my resin, and now I'm thoroughly mixing that to make sure that the pigment is really thoroughly incorporated. As you can see here, I'm keeping my color pretty transparent, so just a little bit of alcohol ink will go a long way. Next, I'm going to fill my mold, and as you're pouring the resin, you want to work slowly because the resin's pretty viscous and it takes it a while to settle and level out to where it's going to be. But after I've got my mold completely full, I'll hit it with my heat gun just to pop any air bubbles that are rising to the surface. With deep molds like this, you can also use a popsicle stick around the edge to kind of coax some of those air bubbles up so you can easily pop them before covering it and letting it cure completely. So I've given my tray about 24 hours to cure, and I'm just going to pop it out of the mold before I add a couple decal stickers to it. And really quickly, if you are enjoying this video, please don't forget to give it a like. It not only helps out my channel a whole lot, but it also lets me know that I'm making content that you want to see from me. So I've got these cute little koi fish decals, and once again, everything that I used will be linked down in the description, so you can check all of that out. But I'm just going to arrange some of these little decals onto my piece to give it a little bit more movement, just a couple more things going on with it. Also, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who's subscribed so far. This channel is so close to hitting 8,000 subscribers, and it is so cool to see the community that's forming here with you guys talking to each other, answering each other's questions in the comments. It's really, really cool to see. If you're not subscribed already, hit that bell, join the club. We're really friendly here, and we'd love to have you. And thank you, thank you, thank you so much. All right, and so we're on to the fun part. Again, I am working on a couple different projects here. Really, we just need enough resin to flood the inside of the tray. So probably about 20 milliliters would have done. And I'm using just a 2-part epoxy resin. So it's 1 part epoxy and 1 part hardener, just a 1-to-1 ratio, really easy to use. And I'm gonna add the same combination of alcohol inks to that just so that the color is consistent. I did speed up this footage just so you're not watching me mix resin all day long, but I would recommend mixing your resin slowly so you don't incorporate a bunch of air bubbles into it as you go. And now that I've got my second batch of resin mixed up, I'm gonna just flood the inside of that tray. And now we wait. The key to this technique is really patience, because what we're going to be waiting for is the perfect moment when the resin isn't fully cured, but it is pretty cured, or it's cured enough that we can make our ripples without it completely leveling out. So definitely start this project on a day that you've got time to babysit it, but here we go. So I'm covering my project just to make sure that any dust or debris stays out of it while it's curing, and I set a timer. So I'm checking it now after about 4 hours and 50 minutes, and instead of checking the piece itself, I'm looking at the resin that was left over in my mixing cup, and as you can see here, it's still not quite ready. When I try to make like a peak or anything like that, it levels out pretty quickly. So checking it again now at about 7 hours, and I think we're ready to go. See how the resin's really tacky, it's not leveling out, and I just used my gloved hand to try this technique in the bottom of that cup, and it's keeping its form, so let's go ahead and do this. You're going to need a lot of slip on your finger when you do this technique, so I'm using some acrylic pouring oil. It's just a silicone-based oil, and I put that on the tip of my finger, and then I'm gently going to make one little circle and push it down to the bottom of that cured level of resin. and then going around that outside circle, just making one more concentric circle using even but slightly firm pressure to make those ridges. And like I said before, patience is really key with this one. There's a number of different factors for how fast your resin is going to cure, mainly how warm it is in the area that you're working or in your room, the type of resin you're using, the time of year that it is. Basically, the hotter that your resin is, the faster it will cure, and the colder it is, the longer it's going to take to cure. So just because my piece was ready to work after about 7 hours doesn't mean yours will be. So this really is kind of a trial and error thing. You might not get it right on the first try, but it's definitely a fun one to experiment with. And when you get it right, the results are really satisfying. I also did check on this piece every 10 minutes or so and just kind of reinforce those ridges, because I found that as my resin was curing, it was slowly starting to level out, and I really wanted to get a nice clear ridge or ripple effect. So make sure, like I said earlier, that you've got time for this project, that you can really babysit it and come back and check on it as it's curing. And if you've made it this far in the video, leave me a comment and let me know what you're working on, what sort of techniques you're using. Are there some trends that you'd like to see me try? Let me know what you're doing, what you're interested in, and what you'd like to see from me. I always love hearing from you guys. But once I'm happy with the ridges and I don't think that it's going to level out, I'll let this cure. And after it's cured, we're going to have to just wash it off because it will have a bit of residual oil on it. And then we'll move on to our next step, which will be making our water splash. To make my water splash, I'll be using UV resin from Let's Resin, and I've got a 1 ounce measuring cup, and I'll make a small ring of resin around the bottom of that measuring cup. And then using a popsicle stick, I'm just gonna drag that resin up the sides. And I want it to be pretty irregular just to mimic water. After that, I'm going to use my UV light to cure this until it's nice and crunchy and I can pop that out really easily. And this part of this tutorial is inspired by Daniel Cooper. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your expertise with us. And it's great to be part of this artist community here on YouTube. And this piece isn't quite cured enough to pop it out easily, so I'm going to put it under my light one more time, and that should be enough to get it out pretty easily. Once I've got the base of my splash out of the molds, aka my 1 ounce measuring cup, I'm going to dip it in a little jar of UV resin. So just holding it with a pair of tweezers and dipping it in there just to make it a little bit thicker, a little bit more irregular, kind of get those drips. And because when it's so thin, you do get those lines and like the measuring numbers from the cup. So just another layer of resin, and that should fix all of those little problems that we're having. But it's definitely a little bit finicky to hold the piece, and you don't want the piece to cure to the tweezers. So as soon as you can kind of let it down, I would suggest to go ahead and drop it down to your silicone mat so it can just cure. Once it's cured a little bit more, it's easier to manipulate, and making sure that that's fully cured before we move on. One more little dip. I still wasn't happy with how like the edges were looking. I wanted it to be just like a little bit softer, a little bit more fluid. So going in with one more dip in this jar of UV resin. And obviously, anytime that you store resin in any sort of container that it's not used for, that jar is now just for resin. So I'm using just a little mason jar. I've got it taped off, and I'm never going to use that for food or anything else like that ever again. This is now just purely for crafting. When my resin water splash is completely cured, it's going to be time to connect it to the piece. So we're going to use a little bit more of our UV resin just around that outside bottom edge of the piece, and I'm going to line that up with the center of my ripple. I've got my UV light set up already, ready to go, and I'm just going to cure this in place until that is attached. Making a water drop ended up being way more difficult than I thought it would, so if you'd like a very in-depth experimental video, I will link that in the description. But in the tiniest nutshell, what you do is you take some clear shampoo and some water, and then you drop your UV resin in and cure it before it hits the bottom. Easier said than done. Again, I will have that video listed. It's really fun. There's so many ways that you could use this, but this is going to be our last little finishing touch to really make this water splash pop. Do you see how it's so bulbous on the end and then we get that nice long stem? This took a lot of trial and error. But after cleaning that off, my last step will be using a little bit of UV resin and placing that drop right in the center of my splash. It's really going to add some depth and dimension and make the overall effect really realistic. I really think that this is such a fun and innovative way to use resin and UV resin, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think of this project in the comments. Would you believe me if I told you that I stepped on this? So I was filming something else and I moved this off my desk to get it out of the way so it wouldn't be in my shot, and as soon as I stood up, I felt a little crunch. I'm devastated. I wasn't planning on listing this on Etsy or anything like because it's one of my first attempts and I want to get a little bit better at this technique before I send them out into the world, but I didn't even get like finished shots of it. So got my little UV lamp going again. I'm gonna try to fix it. RIPs in chat. All right, I think I salvaged it. I was a little bit hasty. I probably should have used a drill and just drilled down the entire piece and then put another piece over it, but I just kind of took my anger out with a little hammer and plopped it right on top. Again, it's not perfect, but I do feel like this video is valuable to anybody who's trying to learn this technique. And let me know in the comments below if you have ruined an art piece that you were really excited over something really stupid, just to help me feel not as alone. Anyway, you guys, let me know what you think of this technique in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for spending part of your day with me, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this video. And if you did make it all the way to the end of the video, leave me some sort of food-themed emoji or comment just to confuse anybody who hasn't made it this time. I really hope that this video inspires you to make something of your own today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!